All right. Did we figure it out? I think I did it. Okay. Sorry about that if you've been trying to watch live. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about somewhat of an uncomfortable topic, but what's new? So, sometimes the things that we talk about here are difficult to think about, difficult to talk about, difficult to admit, because basically what we talk about here are the things that we do that we don't feel good about in our relationships, the things that we do in our relationships to our kids and our relationships to our partners that we wish we were doing differently. And so if you are here watching live, or if you're here and you watch the videos on replay, I want to commend you just for that, because most of the things that we talk about are sad, um, and difficult and challenging in some way. They get better as we practice different skills and as we practice showing up for ourselves. But this is difficult work. It is also wonderful work. It is also beautiful work, and healing and loving and incredible. It is also all of those things. But it is uncomfortable to talk about the ways in which we feel like we are failing our families, or the ways in which we feel like we are harming the people that we care about most. And tonight's topic is no different. We are talking about spanking, arm grabbing, forms of physical aggression that parents sometimes use to try and get compliance out of their kids. And most people, when they spank their kids, or they grab their kids' arms, or they get in their face or do something, end up feeling really, really guilty about it later, because usually it means they were on the receiving end of that as a child, and they know that they don't want to be doing that, but they still find themselves doing that. Sometimes it's, shameful statements where, you had a really critical mother or a really critical father, and you find yourself being really critical to your kids or to your partner. That's how these patterns get passed down. We experience them over and over as a kid, and they become sort of our default wiring. And then we find them leaking out of ourselves when we don't know what else to do. When we feel dysregulated, we fall into the patterns that were modeled for us as kids. So for any of you who had spanking modeled for you as a child, you likely had a couple of different responses to that. One, to think how important it was and how you're going to make sure that you do that with your kids, because it helped keep you on the straight and narrow. That is really what's happening in the brain. There is your brain is trying to hold two things at once. One of those things being my parents love me, and the other one being my parents hurt me. And so in order to hold those two ideas at once, we have to make sense of it, in a way that allows us to keep the truth that my parents love me and care about me. And most parents that spank their kids do love and care about them, but they are also dysregulated, and they are also using force and aggression and fear to get compliance. But for a child to try and make sense of that experience, in order for them to hold on to that truth that mom loves me or dad loves me, and mom and dad hits me, and mom and dad spanks me, um, they have to sort of do this mental gymnastics that says, spanking is love, hitting is love. This tough love shaped me, modeled me, helped me, whatever. They learn to look at that harmful behavior through basically rose-colored glasses, because it's too painful to look at somebody who loves me is hurting me. But that's really what spanking is. Spanking happens when there is a power imbalance, and when a parent is so dysregulated that they can't figure out how to get their kids to listen, or figure out how to get cooperation. They get dysregulated, and they spank to try and regain the control that they feel like they're losing. And so that's really, in a nutshell, what happens. Now, there are tons of studies that you can look at. The studies are widely available. Kids who are spanked are much more likely to be involved in all sorts of problematic activities. They're more likely to have violence happen in their homes. There's so many things that are more likely to happen if you were spanked as a child. But one of the things that I don't think gets talked about as much is the emotional aspect of being shut off to our own emotions about our caregivers and what love means, what it means to hold that confusing space of this person I love is hurting me, and those two things becoming fused together, that love is hurt and that love means you're going to hurt. That is an incredibly problematic wiring that happens as a result of spanking. And um, when fear is involved in the loving relationship, uh, it it means that the relationship isn't going to be as secure as it could be. And what we're after, uh, at least in this group, is secure, loving, safe relationships. And that can't happen if we are afraid. If we are afraid that at some point we're going to be hurt, we're going to be betrayed, we're going to be, somebody's going to use their power against us. And so, spanking and any forms of aggression, physical aggression, lead to that feeling of you're bigger than me or you have more power than me, and that someday when I make you upset enough, you're going to use that aggression, that power, that strength against me. And when that is fully present, we can't fully trust. And so if we want to have the kind of relationship with our kids where they can trust us with the big stuff going on in their lives, and they can count on us to be there for them, and they can bring us into the mistakes that they're in the middle of making and they need help getting out of, we can't have that element of fear involved. Um, so what do we do if we have that wiring, and we find that rage or whatever bubbling up when we, have that feeling of powerlessness come up? We have to do something with that. We have to learn to process those feelings of powerlessness and grieve the fact that we didn't have safe enough caregivers. And when I say safe enough, I don't mean that they didn't love you. I'm sure most of your parents truly loved you, and most of your parents probably thought that they were doing the right thing even. There's so much um, cultural and sometimes even religious practices that teach us that spanking and hitting is somehow valuable, that somehow having an element of fear in the relationship is important, even the idea that fear and respect are the same thing. Um, there's all of these ideas that have gotten um, communicated to us over and over and over, and it happens in schools. There was corporal punishment. There's just so many different messages that we received about hitting being okay when it's a child and a parent. And it's just not okay to hit people who are smaller than you. It's not okay to hit people at all. It's not okay to hit people to get what you want. And I know and even saying it's not okay to hit people, people think of spanking as different than hitting. People think of spanking as spanking and hitting as hitting. But really, it's the same thing. Really, when you break it down, it is, I am going to hurt you physically because you're not doing what I want you to do. And in any other relationship, we call that abuse, and rightly so. And that's a pretty strong stance, but it's a really honest and authentic stance. And I can understand if there will be people in the comments saying, my parents spanked me and I turned out just fine, or my parents spanked me and I'm so thankful. And And I can tell you, as somebody who used to be spanked, that that is, I understand. I understand why you're saying that. I understand. I understand the journey you're on, and there is a step after the step you're on. There is a step after those mental gymnastics that you have to perform to hold on to the fact that spanking didn't harm you. And the fact that you can look at somebody else and say, if you don't do what I want you to do, I'm going to hurt you. The fact that you think that that's okay in itself is evidence that you were harmed by being spanked. Because in your wiring, you believe, there's a part of you that believes that that it's okay to hurt people when they do something that you don't like. And it's okay. It's okay if it's your child. It's okay if it, no, it wouldn't be okay if it was a partner or spouse. No, it wouldn't be okay if it was a coworker. But if it's your child, if it's somebody who definitely can't hit back and definitely can't fight back, then it's okay. And I'm really sad and I'm really sorry to be delivering this message to you if you're in that place of still holding on to this idea that it didn't harm you. I'm really sorry. Um, because it's a painful awakening to have to come to terms with the fact that you might be harming your kids or that you might have harmed your kids. That is a very painful place to be when you think that, something that you've been doing is right even, or, the will of God even, or something like that. It is really, it's really jarring to have somebody say to you that you're causing harm. And the evidence is clear. Spanking is harm. Hitting people that depend on you for their safety is a harmful thing to do. And so if you are watching this and thinking like, no, you're crazy, you're wrong, I don't know what kind of spanking you saw, but the spanking that was done in my house, it wasn't like that, or all of those things. What's happening is your brain is working really, really hard to hold on to the fact that mom and dad love me, mom and dad are good, and I'm okay with them. And eventually, hopefully, you'll come to the place where you get to the place where you are willing to look at what the evidence says and are willing to look at the harm that comes through disciplined, what looks like from the outside, disciplined spanking. Oftentimes people think of spanking of having two different versions of it, like the I'm so mad at you and I'm going to spank you out of anger, and I've calmed down and I'm going to spank you, but I'm so sad to be spanking you. And we think that those are different, but and in some ways they are different, but really in most of the ways that they're the exact same. At the end of the day, it's still very confusing and still very damaging to have somebody who is telling you that they love you hurt your body. And and at some point, I hope that you get to the place, if you are somebody who is currently spanking, that you get to the place where you're ready to look at the harm that you're causing and you're ready to look at the damage that you're causing. And sometimes until you actually are ready to get to that place, you're sort of blinded to the damage that you might have been inflicting. And so sometimes behaviors like lying or behaviors like defiance or whatever these quote quote bad behaviors that your kids are exhibiting are a direct response to the spanking in itself, because in order for that child to preserve their sense of dignity and autonomy, they have to sort of rebel. And then there are sometimes the kids who go into the other direction, which they might move into people pleasing. So you might think, oh, I only had to spank a couple times, and my daughter, oh, she's a model citizen. She behaves so well and such, and she's my easiest child or whatever. But really what she's doing is she's in a fawn response, which is one of the trauma responses. There are 4 different trauma responses. Fight and flight are the ones you're probably most familiar with if you're familiar with any of them. fight, flight, fawn, and freeze. And so when we cannot escape the threat, we through flight, we move toward the threat through fawn or through fight. Well, kids can't often fight the parent who is bigger than them. So fight is out, usually out. And if they do really have a strong sense of fight, then that's where they'll move into even stronger defiance in other ways. So they can't get away from you physically, they can't get away from the spanking, but they can offer emotional fight, which it would be defiance and acting out in other ways. And that would be directly linked to the spanking that's happening. So in from their perspective, um, this harmful situation is happening, this scary situation is happening, so they're going to armor and protect themselves through fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. Um, so, um, so there are so many different ways a child might respond, and before watching this video, or maybe before you're ready to look at the harmful effects of spanking, you might look at these behaviors as like the fawn behavior as compliance, like, oh, this spanking's working, but really the child's in a fawn trauma response. Or you might look at the defiance and you're like, oh, we just have, maybe I'm not spanking hard enough, or maybe I'm not, doing it as immediately as I should be, but really they're having a fight response to the situation. Um, Freeze would be, um, it's sort of like deer in the headlights, like they stop and try and make themselves small, or they try and make themselves not a threat. They try and make themselves invisible, so they try and kind of move out of the spotlight and let the other siblings kind of take more prominent roles in the family. That could be something that's happening. And flight would be like emotionally shutting down. So they can't like physically get out of the situation, but they might emotionally be in flight. So that would be like shutting down and isolating um, and otherwise kind of mentally checking out of the situation because it's become too much for them. I am going to do a longer video on the four different trauma responses. So if you're interested in hearing more about the different trauma responses, put trauma responses in the comments below and I'll get to those. But if you are a family who is currently engaging in spanking, um, please reach out. There is so much wiring that needs to be undone in that situation. And this is a judgment-free zone. I can tell you as somebody who very much thought I would spank my own kids until I looked at all the research myself, until I started doing what I'm doing now. I was a avid proponent of spanking, and then I learned what my brain was doing, and I definitely decided not to do that. But I can tell you that as somebody who has that spanking wiring, that rage comes up in me just the same way that it does for you. And I've had to learn to process through that and figure out what's going on and navigate what's going on so I don't let that past trauma basically leak out onto my kids. And so that's really what we're trying to do here. And if you've already, if you've stopped spanking, you might need to do specific repair work with your kids and trust building and helping them process through that. If you're still currently spanking, you might need help stopping, and it would be my honor to help you with that. You certainly are not going to get judgment from me. I understand how complex this situation is, and I don't want you for a second to feel like you're going to get judgment from me. We all do the best we can with the information we have at the time and the skills that we have. And we often didn't have parents who were very skilled in their parenting. And so we tend to just do what we know how to do. My job is to make sure that you have better skills so that you can end the cycles of trauma, and so that those generational patterns end with you. They end with us. And it is my greatest joy to help families do that. And if you take a look at any of the testimonials on my website or in this group, you are going to hear that it's not going to be judgment that you get from me. It's not going to be judgment that you get from a team. It is going to be compassion and understanding and practical tools to help you get to the next step so that you can end the cycles that are hurting you and hurting your loved ones. So if you are ready to take the next step and figure out what to do instead of spanking, instead of yelling, instead of the arm grabbing, instead of all of that stuff that just kind of leaks out of you when you don't know what else to do, reach out to us and we will help you get the resources that you need to get started. And if you are not in the financial position to invest in a program right now, we have scholarship pricing available. So, and we have full scholarships available for families who need those too. So please reach out to me wherever you're at. Even if working with me isn't the right outcome for you, I'll tell you that. I will tell you, hey, maybe you should talk to this therapist, or maybe you should talk to this other provider. Uh, if working with me is not right for you, I will flat out tell you that because um I only want people working with me who are a good fit for many reasons. So please don't be nervous about reaching out to me. I know it can be really scary when you feel like you're inviting someone in to look at like the scary parts of your relationships, the areas in which you feel like you are not doing a good job, or the areas in which you feel like you're failing. But I promise that once you do reach out and you make that first step, life gets so much better. Life gets so, so much better. I hope you do. I hope to talk to you soon. And if I don't talk to you soon, via Messenger or a phone conversation, I will see you next week in the comments and in the group and on the live. All right. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you soon. Bye bye.